My name is Catherine Harris, and at 32, I thought I understood the rhythm of Limestone Valley Hospital. As the lead patient care coordinator in Chalk Ridge, Kentucky, I'd spent 6 years navigating the controlled chaos of our 200-bed facility nestled in the Appalachian foothills. The morning shift always began the same way. Badge scan at 6:47 a.m., coffee from the third-floor break room, and a quick review of overnight admissions before the day truly started. But that Tuesday in March felt different from the moment I stepped off the elevator. The usual chatter among the nursing staff seemed muted, conversations stopping mid-sentence when I approached. Even the familiar hum of the Epic system seemed quieter as workstations logged morning vitals and medication schedules. "Morning, Catherine," Diana Thompson called from behind the nurses' station, her voice carrying an odd. As my backup nurse and closest colleague for the past 3 years, Diana usually greeted me with updates about her weekend hiking adventures or complaints about the hospital's new electronic charting requirements. Today, she barely looked up from her computer screen. I settled into my workstation and pulled up the patient census. 43 active cases across our medical surgical unit. Nothing unusual for a Tuesday. The overnight notes showed routine admissions, a pneumonia case, 2 post-surgical recoveries, and a cardiac monitoring patient. Standard protocols, familiar patterns. Yet something felt off-kilter in ways I couldn't articulate. During morning rounds, I noticed Diana handling patient consent forms and privacy acknowledgments with unusual efficiency. She'd always been thorough, but today she seemed almost mechanical, processing paperwork with a speed that made me pause. When I mentioned the new HIPAA compliance training scheduled for next week, she simply nodded without her typical eye roll about mandatory education sessions. The first real sign came during lunch break. I was reviewing quarterly patient satisfaction scores when I overheard Nathan Rodriguez from IT mentioning unusual network activity on several nursing workstations. "Just routine monitoring," he assured the charge nurse, but his expression suggested otherwise. By afternoon, the atmosphere had shifted further. Conversations seemed carefully constructed, as if everyone was measuring their words. When I asked Diana about the Henderson family's discharge planning, she provided textbook responses without the personal insights that usually made her such an effective patient advocate. The final piece fell into place during evening handoff. While reviewing patient charts, I noticed several files had been accessed outside normal care protocols. The timestamps showed after-hours logins, patient contact information pulled up during non-clinical hours. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable to someone who understood our documentation systems. As I prepared to leave that night, Diana approached my desk with an expression I'd never seen before. Part guilt, part defiance, and something else I couldn't identify. "Catherine, we need to talk," she said quietly, glancing around the nearly empty unit. "There are things happening here that you don't understand." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I waited for her to continue, but she just shook her head and walked away, leaving me alone with a growing sense that everything I thought I knew about my workplace and my closest colleague was about to change. The conversation Diana had promised never came. Instead, she began arriving early for shifts, staying late, and volunteering for additional responsibilities that seemed oddly specific. When the Henderson family's insurance information needed updating, Diana handled it personally. When Mrs. Patterson's emergency contact list required verification, Diana took that task too. I'd known Diana Martinez for 3 years, ever since she transferred from Louisville General to join our cardiac unit. She'd been my backup nurse through countless difficult cases, the person I trusted to maintain continuity of care when I wasn't available. Her attention to detail had always impressed me. She remembered patients' preferred names, their family dynamics, even their coffee preferences during long stays. That attention to detail now seemed different, more calculating than caring. The first concrete appeared 2 weeks after our interrupted conversation. I was updating patient discharge summaries when I noticed Diana accessing the electronic health record system during her lunch break. The Epic workstation showed her reviewing contact information for patients who weren't currently under our care, former patients whose cases had closed weeks or even months ago. "Catching up on documentation?" I asked, approaching her workstation. Diana's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, closing screens before turning to face me. "Just reviewing some follow-up protocols. You know how thorough I like to be." Her explanation was reasonable, but something about her posture, shoulders tense, eyes avoiding direct contact, triggered my instincts. I'd seen that same defensive stance from residents caught cutting corners, or nurses trying to cover mistakes. Over the following days, I began paying closer attention to Diana's work patterns. She'd developed a habit of printing patient information sheets, claiming she needed hard copies for better organization. When I offered to show her the digital annotation features that could eliminate the need for printing, she declined, saying she preferred her current system. The breakthrough came during a particularly busy Thursday evening. Nathan Rodriguez from IT appeared at our nurses' station with a concerned expression and a tablet displaying network activity logs. "Catherine, I need to discuss some unusual access patterns we've detected," he said quietly, positioning himself so other staff couldn't overhear. "Someone's been downloading patient contact databases outside normal clinical workflows." My stomach tightened as he showed me the data. The timestamps corresponded exactly with Diana's extended lunch breaks and after-shift activities. Patient names, phone numbers, addresses, and insurance information had been systematically accessed and copied. "How long has this been happening?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "At least 6 weeks, possibly longer." The pattern suggests someone building comprehensive contact lists rather than accessing information for immediate patient care. That evening, I stayed late to review our unit's access logs more thoroughly. The was undeniable. Diana had been systematically copying patient contact information, focusing particularly on patients with good insurance coverage and stable financial situations. The data included home addresses, phone numbers, emergency contacts, and detailed insurance information. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Diana wasn't just accessing this information randomly, she was building targeted marketing lists. I remembered her mentioning a side business several months ago, something about health and wellness consulting. At the time, I'd been supportive, even impressed by her entrepreneurial spirit. Now I understood why she'd been so interested in patients' post-discharge experiences, why she'd volunteered to handle so many follow-up calls. The next morning, I arrived early to find Diana already at her workstation, printing what appeared to be patient contact sheets. When she saw me approaching, she quickly gathered the papers and slipped them into her personal bag. "Diana, we need to discuss your recent system access patterns," I said, keeping my voice professional but firm. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "I don't know what you mean." "Nathan Rodriguez showed me the IT logs. You've been downloading patient contact information outside clinical protocols. I need to understand what's happening." For a moment, Diana's carefully maintained composure cracked. I saw fear, anger, and something that looked almost like relief cross her features. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," she said finally. "My student loans, my mother's medical bills. I needed additional income." The wellness consulting business was legitimate, I just thought. Former patients might be interested in services that could help them maintain their health. "You used confidential patient information to build marketing lists for your personal business?" "I never shared medical details," Diana said quickly. "Just contact information. And only for patients who'd already been discharged. I thought it was a gray area." The rationalization in her voice made my chest tight. There was no gray area when it came to patient privacy violations. Diana knew this as well as I did. We'd both completed the same HIPAA training, signed the same confidentiality agreements. "How many patients' information did you copy?" Diana's silence stretched long, enough that I knew the number would be significant. "Diana, I need you to understand the severity of this situation. This isn't a policy interpretation issue. It's a federal privacy violation. Patients trusted us with their personal information for medical care, not marketing purposes." "I know," she whispered. "I know it was wrong. But I was desperate, and I thought if I was careful, If I only contacted people who might genuinely benefit from wellness services. That's not your decision to make. Patient consent doesn't extend to commercial solicitation, regardless of your intentions. As I spoke, I realized how completely Diana had betrayed not just our patient's trust, but mine as well. Every time I'd relied on her to handle sensitive information, every patient handoff where I'd trusted her judgment, every moment I'd considered her a professional partner, all of it had been compromised by her willingness to exploit patient data for personal gain. The weight of what I had to do next settled over me like a heavy blanket. Diana wasn't just my backup nurse. She was someone I'd trusted, someone I'd considered a friend. But patient privacy wasn't negotiable, and the scope of her violations demanded immediate action. I have to report this to administration and compliance, I said. Diana's eyes filled with tears. Catherine, please. If you report this, I'll lose my license. My career will be over. Can't we find another way to handle this? The desperation in her voice almost broke my resolve. But I thought about every patient whose trust she'd violated, every family whose private information she'd exploited for profit. I'm sorry, Diana, but this isn't something I can overlook or handle informally. Too many people have been affected. As I walked toward the administrative offices, I felt the weight of betrayal settling deep in my chest. Not just Diana's betrayal of our patients, but the realization that someone I'd trusted completely had been systematically violating everything we'd sworn to protect. The administrative wing of Limestone Valley Hospital felt different as I walked down the polished corridor toward the compliance office. The familiar hum of fluorescent lights seemed louder, the antiseptic smell more pronounced. Each step echoed my growing certainty that there was no turning back from what I was about to set in motion. Margaret Harrison, our chief compliance officer, looked up from her computer screen as I knocked on her open door. Her expression shifted from routine politeness to concern as she read my face. Catherine, what can I do for you? I need to report a HIPAA violation. A serious one involving patient contact information being used for unauthorized commercial purposes. Margaret's pen stopped moving across the document she'd been reviewing. Please, sit down, tell me everything. For the next 40 minutes, I laid out every detail I'd discovered about Diana's wellness coaching business, the patient contact lists, the systematic exploitation of our Epic system Access. Margaret took meticulous notes, occasionally asking for clarification about dates, patient volumes, and the specific nature of Diana's solicitations. You said she admitted to this directly? Margaret asked. Yes. She acknowledged using patient information to build her client base for wellness coaching services. She claimed she was being selective, only contacting patients she thought would benefit, but that doesn't change the fundamental violation. Margaret's expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes that suggested she understood the magnitude of what I was reporting. I'll need to involve our legal department and initiate a formal investigation immediately. This will require interviewing Diana, reviewing system access logs, and potentially contacting affected patients. Are you prepared for what this process will entail? The question hung in the air between us. I knew she wasn't just asking about my willingness to cooperate with an investigation. She was asking if I was prepared for the professional and personal fallout that would inevitably follow. I understand the implications, I said, but patient privacy isn't optional. Within 2 hours, Diana had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The speed of the hospital's response surprised me, but Margaret explained that HIPAA violations required immediate action to prevent further breaches and demonstrate institutional commitment to compliance. The news spread through the cardiac unit like wildfire. By the end of my shift, I could feel the weight of my colleagues' stares, the whispered conversations that stopped when I approached, the careful distance that suddenly appeared in routine interactions. Nathan Williams, one of the senior nurses who'd worked with Diana for over 3 years, cornered me near the medication room. Catherine, I heard what happened. Are you sure about this? Diana's got 2 kids and a mortgage. This could destroy her life. And what about the patients whose private information she exploited? Don't they matter? Nathan's face flushed. Of course they matter, but couldn't you have handled this differently? Talked to Diana first, given her a chance to stop on her own? I did talk to her. She admitted to everything and asked me to cover it up. The conversation ended there, but I could see in Nathan's expression the same conflict I'd been wrestling with, the between personal loyalty and professional obligation. The difference was that I'd chosen to prioritize patient protection over personal relationships. Not everyone saw it that way. Over the next week, as the investigation expanded, I found myself increasingly isolated. Some colleagues avoided me entirely, while others made pointed comments about loyalty and the importance of supporting each other through difficult times. The atmosphere in the cardiac unit became strained, with conversations stopping when I entered rooms and a general sense that I'd violated some unspoken code of professional solidarity. The only person who consistently supported my decision was Amanda Foster, a nurse practitioner who joined our team 6 months earlier. Amanda had worked in compliance at her previous hospital and understood the legal and ethical implications of Diana's actions. You did the right thing, she told me during a particularly difficult shift when 3 different colleagues had made comments about my betrayal of Diana. Patient privacy violations aren't internal matters, they're federal crimes with serious consequences for everyone involved. Amanda's support became crucial as the investigation revealed the full scope of Diana's activities. The IT audit showed she'd accessed patient records far beyond her assigned cases, downloading contact information for over 200 patients across multiple units. Her wellness coaching website featured testimonials that, while not naming patients directly, contained enough specific details about medical conditions and treatments to potentially identify individuals. The legal implications were staggering. Each unauthorized access represented a separate HIPAA violation, with potential fines reaching into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The hospital's risk management team worked frantically to assess potential liability and develop a response strategy that would satisfy federal regulators. Margaret kept me informed of the investigation's progress, partly because my testimony would be crucial if the case proceeded to formal charges, and partly because she recognized the professional isolation I was experiencing. The preliminary findings support everything you reported, she told me during one of our regular check-ins. Diana's activities were systematic and extensive. She'd been building her client database for over 18 months, using our patient information as her primary marketing tool. The revelation that Diana's violations had been ongoing for so long made me question every interaction we'd had, every time I'd trusted her with sensitive information, every patient handoff where I'd relied on her professionalism. How many times had she accessed records specifically to harvest contact information? How many patients had received unsolicited wellness coaching pitches because I'd assigned their care to someone I trusted? The investigation also revealed that Diana had been particularly targeting patients with chronic conditions, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, conditions that would make them prime candidates for wellness coaching services. The calculated nature of her targeting made her violations feel even more predatory. 3 weeks after my initial report, Diana requested a meeting with me through her attorney. Margaret advised against it, but I agreed to meet in the presence of legal counsel, hoping to understand how someone I'd trusted could have systematically betrayed everything we'd sworn to protect. Diana looked exhausted when she entered the conference room, flanked by her lawyer and a union representative. The confident, competent nurse I'd worked alongside for 2 years had been replaced by someone who seemed diminished, defeated. "Catherine, I want you to know that I never intended for things to go this far," she began. "When I started the wellness coaching, I genuinely believed I was helping people. I thought if I was careful about how I approached patients, if I focused on people who really needed support." "You thought wrong," I interrupted. "Patient information isn't yours to use, regardless of your intentions." Her lawyer placed a restraining hand on Diana's arm, but she continued. "I know that now. I know I made terrible decisions. But I need you to understand that I never meant to hurt anyone. I was trying to build something positive, something that would help people improve their health." The meeting lasted an hour, but it didn't change anything fundamental about the situation. Diana's intentions, however well-meaning she claimed they were, didn't alter the fact that she'd systematically violated patient privacy for personal gain. Her remorse, while seemingly genuine, couldn't undo the damage to patient trust or the legal exposure she'd created for the hospital. 2 days later, Diana submitted her resignation, effective immediately. The hospital accepted it, avoiding the need for a formal termination hearing, but ensuring that her departure would be reported to the state nursing board and included in the National Practitioner Databank. The resolution felt both inevitable and anticlimactic. After weeks of investigation, interviews, and legal maneuvering, Diana's career in nursing was effectively over, ended by her own choices but triggered by my decision to prioritize patient protection over personal loyalty. As I processed the finality of Diana's departure, I realized that the betrayal I'd uncovered had fundamentally changed how I viewed professional relationships. Trust, once broken by such systematic deception, couldn't be easily rebuilt. The colleague I'd relied on, the backup nurse I'd considered a friend, had been exploiting patient information for months while maintaining a facade of professional integrity. The cardiac unit slowly began to return to normal operations, but the atmosphere remained changed. Some colleagues gradually resumed normal interactions with me, while others maintained a cool distance that suggested they still viewed my actions as a betrayal of professional solidarity rather than a protection of patient rights. Amanda continued to provide crucial support, reminding me that compliance with privacy regulations wasn't optional, and that my decision to report Diana's violations had prevented further exploitation of patient information. "You protected every future patient who won't have their private information stolen for commercial purposes," she told me. "That matters more than workplace politics." As the immediate crisis subsided, I began to understand that the real betrayal hadn't been my reporting of Diana's violations. It had been Diana's systematic exploitation of patient trust, her willingness to use medical information for personal profit, and her assumption that I would help cover up her crimes. The investigation was closing, Diana was gone, but the impact of her betrayal would continue to shape how I approached professional relationships and patient privacy protection for years to come.